Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a new video. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I hope everybody's doing well. So let's get into the stories today. Am I wrong for telling my ex-boyfriend's daughter it's not my problem? I, 38 female, dated John, 40 male, for about 6 months. We had known each other for over a year before we started dating. We broke up 3 months ago. The reason for the breakup was because of his daughter, Tia, 16 female. From the very beginning, she was hostile towards me, rude comments, putting me, my cooking, etc. down, constantly referring to me as that B word. She said I was the reason her parents broke up. False. They broke up 10 years ago, 9 years before I met John. I have a stepmom who went out her way to try and push her way into my life, so I actively did everything I could to be the exact opposite. I tried to give her her space. I tried talking to her, asking her what I could do at least to make things between us civil. Her answer, I could voluntarily leave this world. Oh, now her telling her to unalive herself. What? John was no help. He threatened to ground her and take her things away, but they were empty threats, and Tia just continues to tirade. John was no help. He threatened to ground her, take her things away, but they were empty threats, and she would just continue her tirade against me. Her mother, Chloe, who honestly is awesome, even tried to talk to her and figure out what her problem was. Tia couldn't come up with one reason why she didn't like me. She just didn't. It all came to a head one night while they were at my house. We had ordered food and I went to go pick it up. When I got back, I found John in my dining room, sweeping up the remains of my grandmother's antique picture. My grandmother meant the world to me, so seeing that picture destroyed broke my heart. I demanded to know what happened, and Tia gave me a smirk and said, "Oops, it was an accident." I asked her how it was an accident, and she just shrugged and said something like, "I think I bumped the table and it just fell off. There is no way that can happen. My dining table is heavy. You would have to slam yourself into it to even shake that picture." I told him to leave and spent the rest of the night crying. The next day, I called John and told him I couldn't do this anymore. He tried talking me out of it, but my mind was made up. Fast forward to 2 days ago. I leave work and there's Tia. She started going on about how John's new girlfriend, Jane, how Jane is a monster. Eventually, Tia tried her old tricks on Jane, but Jane gives it right back to her. Tia calls her names and Jane calls her names back. Tia insults Jane, Jane insults her back. The worst was Tia accidentally broke something of Jane's, and in retaliation, Jane took Tia's phone and smashed it. I asked her if she had told her mom. She and Chloe decided that Tia wasn't to go over John's anymore. I told her something like, "It sounds like everything's settled then." Tia started crying, asking if that was it. I just looked at her and said, "Yep, your mom handled it. It's not my problem," and I left. I was talking to my sister about this last night, and she called me an a-hole. She said that obviously Tia is hurting and needed me. She came to me for a reason, and the least I could have done was be a shoulder for her to cry on. I just don't feel anything. I think I'm just numb to Tia now. So, am I wrong? I mean, why would her dad's ex-girlfriend, who she obviously hated for no reason, be a shoulder for her to cry on? Like, what is she supposed to do? Like, I'm so confused. Like, the dad is now with the new woman. Is OP supposed to go to the dad and say, "Hey, break up with your new girlfriend, me and you will get back together"? I'm so confused. Like, what is OP supposed to do in this situation? Top comment, not the a-hole. Tia's been awful to you for months and you don't owe her anything. She's not your responsibility, especially after everything she's put you through. You try to be kind and she repeatedly disrespected you. Why should you keep tolerating her? Exactly. Like, why would you want to tolerate somebody who obviously was disrespecting you for no reason? And then someone else said, "I fail to see why on earth your own sister would call you an a-hole in this situation. The girl got what she wanted, you out of her dad's life. It's his new girlfriend. Yeah, if his new girlfriend is giving as good as she gets, probably not the best way for a grown adult to behave, but this girl sounds awful, and her mother knows. Then what are you expected to do? Tia is having her first taste of the old play stupid games, win stupid prizes lesson." Then OP replied saying, "My sister, love her, is very tender-hearted. She's especially sympathetic towards children. I try to tell her that as much as I feel for Tia's situation, I just don't feel anything for the girl. I've exhausted any sympathy I might feel for her." Am I wrong for telling my dad his grief doesn't get to dictate the name my wife and I choose for our children? My dad and I, 28 male, have a complicated relationship. He was divorced from my mom when I was only a baby, and she died when I was very young, 5. He was already remarried and had another child when my mom passed away, and I think he expected with time I would forget about my mom entirely and assimilate into his new family like they were the only one. There was also a big effort to ignore my grief and to expect me to move on like nothing happened. The only time this was ever truly mentioned was when I was 13, and he sat me down and asked me to ask his wife if she would adopt me. Why? He told me she wanted to adopt me but didn't want me to get angry at her for asking because I still had a photo of my mom in my bedroom and I talked about her still. During that little talk, he made a point of saying his wife had raised me for longer and had done everything a real mother should, so it was time for me to acknowledge her in that role and position in my life and to make it official. When I said no, he threw a little tantrum, stomping his foot and pouting before he left the room, and he never mentioned it again, but the strain could be left. His wife died 3.5 years ago. I was engaged to my wife at that time and we were planning our wedding. 6 months after her death, Dad asked how I could move forward with the wedding planning. I told him I still wanted to get married. He said he could understand it and he thought the wedding would be delayed for years. I told him that wasn't happening. He never said anything about it again, but I know he held it all in. And now it has come to surface again. My wife is pregnant with our first child, our daughter, and we have agreed to name her after my mom. My wife wanted a nature name, and my mom had a nature name, so it worked perfectly for us. We haven't announced this yet. During a family dinner with my side, one of my siblings asked if we had a name yet. I said maybe. We weren't saying for sure until she was here. My dad said we all know the baby will be named after his late wife, and there's no point in hiding it. I told him he didn't know that at all. He lost his temper and told me if I had any respect for our family, that is exactly what I would do. I'm so confused. Why is the father acting like this OP doesn't have a mother of their own? Just because your mom died when you were only 5 doesn't mean you still don't have a mother. I'm so confused. Even if his mom was to pass away right after she gave birth to him, he still has a dad. He still has a mom. What? Anyways, I told him he didn't know that at all. He lost his temper and told me if I had any respect for our family, that is exactly what I would do. I told him he's grieving. My siblings are grieving and I should take that into consideration. I told him that he has nothing to do with what we name our child. He wanted to talk one-on-one and I agreed to do so. He told me if I'm hiding the name like that, then I must be naming my daughter after someone else, likely that woman, and how I was inconsiderate to consider such a thing when his wife had raised me and his wife had died in the last 4 years. He told me a good son would take this into consideration and honor the woman his father loved, the woman who raised him as her very own. I told him his grief does not get to dictate the name my wife and I choose for our child. I told him my grief didn't seem to matter when I was 5, so why was I supposed to put his adult grief first now? I told him there was going to be no more talking about my baby's name because it was none of his business. He has since accused me of invalidating his grief and being insensitive to it. So I think OP is asking if he's the a-hole here. I don't think OP is the a-hole at all because, like, if the dad was to say, hey, like, after they have, like, a kid or two, do you think, like, in the future you can name one of your daughters, you know, the name of my, you know, late wife, you know, after she was your stepmom and, you know, she was my wife and the woman that I was with for all those years, like, you know, something like that. But to say, oh, you have to name your first child the name that my wife had because she was like, please calm down. What's with all this audacity and all this entitlement? And like OP said, why were they invalidating the grief that he was going through, especially as a young 5-year-old child when he lost his mom? And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, whether you have a mom or not, at the end of the day, once you come into this world, you always have a mom. Whether she raised you or not, she's still your mom, and you will always have a mom. Like, it's one thing to honor someone who raised you, whether your parents abandoned you or your parents died. But this crazy entitlement, and it's not like they were good anyways. I mean, yeah, they raised him, but they were invalidating his grief when he was only a child. So, like, what's going on? Like, let me read some comments, y'all, because this story is annoying me. A commenter said, you reminding your dad of how he treated you while you were grieving is brilliant. OP, he's still grieving 4 years later and expects you to put your life on hold, your wedding, for his grief, but he didn't allow you the same. He just forced a new mom on you and got mad when you didn't accept that. He's got some issues he needs to work through, and I think the fact that he'll have to hear your bio mom's name for the rest of his life is punishment enough, not the a-hole. Then OP replied, it's something I tried not to throw at him before, because I know not everyone knows what to do, but his assistant that his grief needs to come first has told me he knew better and just don't care. He expected me to forget my mom to not grieve her, probably in part because he didn't care. Exactly. Like, how do you want... I don't know. People want to do raggedy, shady things, but then they don't like it when you do it the same exact way they treated you towards them, you know?